What's up, perverts? Welcome to One on One with the Grim One. I am your host, the most electrifying man in corpse entertainment, the Necrosexual! And joining me on this hard-hitting episode, we have the Matt Wrestling Machine, the one and only Tim Donst.
Listen to that applause. Thank you so much for having me.
What's up, baby?
Biggest pop I've ever had in my whole career right there.
Mr. Donst, how the hell are you? He's joining us from Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Grim. And for the
You hear that?
another day in the office, I got my my necro juice to keep the conversation flowing.
I like that Necro office. The lighting looks superb.
Yes, the mood lighting. It's got to be on point. I have a very high standard for low production. And we're just doing the best that we can here in this quarantine. And one of the best ways to pass the time is a good old-fashioned necro and chill session. And on this episode, this is one-on-one with the Grim One. So our guests will pick one of their favorite selections, whether it's an album, a pro wrestling match, a movie, something, one thing that they found influential, something that they enjoy, a guilty pleasure perhaps. And for this week, Mr. Donst, tell us about what you selected to go one-on-one with the Grim One.
I chose arguably one of the finest movies ever produced. When aliens come to this desolate planet, surely this would be the jewel that they bring back to their civilization. I'm talking about none other than Pauly Shore's, I'm not sure it's critically acclaimed, movie Son-in-Law.
Son-in-law.
Have you ever seen the movie before?
I do. That's part of my research. So every time...
Was that your first time viewing it, is when I told you about it?
Yes, I went into Son-in-Law as a virgin necrosexual. So it was my first time seeing that movie.
Did you come out a man?
I came out 90 minutes poorer than I entered. But it was a trip. What made you select Son-in-Law? Of all the great movies, of all the Godfathers and Punch Drunk Loves out there, you went with Son-in-Law. Why did you select that to go one-on-one with the Grim One?
I think it's really like quirky and campy. It's a nice stamp on the times of like when it was produced. Like sometimes it's nice to watch a movie and be like, I can tell this was filmed in the 70s. I can tell it's filmed in the 80s. Like nothing's worse than movies that can be filmed during any time period.
Yes.
So I think Son-in-Law is a nice like mental trip down memory lane.
Yes, it opens up.
I would also argue too, when I first saw that movie, I must have been like somewhere between 10 and 13, I'd imagine. And so like I didn't get like half the joke. So every time I watch it, I feel like I'm discovering something else that's funny. It
starts off with the class of 1993 graduation, the graduating class of 1993. And then it follows the protagonist, young Carla Gugino, who I know as Silk Spectre from Watchmen. She went on to star in Watchmen.
Yeah, it also has some names in it. That helps the movie, too.
Right? So she goes off to college. And so when you were a young 10-year-old Tim Donst watching that movie for the first time, seeing this crazy California university and all the hijinks and parties, and of course, the comic relief of Pauly Shore, did it make you say, like, man, I can't wait to go to university?
It's funny, I think when I watched Saved by the Bell, which oddly enough, this also has Kelly Kapowski in it. When I watched Saved by the Bell, I was like, oh, I'm excited for high school. Like, fucking everything works out. I never have to do homework. Apparently, I don't have to go to class. I just have to hang out in the hallways and talk with my friends all the time. Maybe I can fucking freeze time. But then when you watch Son-in-Law, like, it's so much weird and, like, nudity and chaos that at a young age, I think I was petrified of college. I can't believe they let you into 6th grade with that face paint on.
Right.
Really cool.
Yeah, it was not a phase I was going through as much as my parents had hoped, but here we are now. So
maybe that's why I chose a pro wrestling career and I chose subconsciously to avoid college because I was still petrified based off this movie.
Okay, yeah, so that's a little bit different because I would expect maybe it would be something that would make you excited to go to college because you have toga parties and these really elaborate, totally unsupervised.
Like a nerdy 10-year-old. Like I was like, oh my god, like what? Like that's probably the first time I've ever seen two girls kiss.
Rebecca, everyone, I'd like you to meet my girlfriend, Lisa. Hi.
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 Nice to meet you.
I'm really sorry about that. Aren't you, Zach?
Speak for yourself. Well, I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
And I'll see you next weekend.
Oh, Dad. Dad, do you have your camera handy?
The first thing that Pauly Shore's character, simply known as Crawl, says when he meets the female protagonist, whose name is escaping me, is, "What's your name? Sally? Jesse? Raphael?" So right from the get-go, I knew that this was going to be some really smart written humor.
Did you laugh at all throughout the movie?
I think I laughed during the lesbian kiss scene just because it was so like heavy-handed, like pandering towards horny young boys.
What about when the dad meets Crawl and he asks for a screwdriver?
Oh yeah, because he's like, "Oh, is it for your daughter?" Oh yeah, he's like, "Can I have a screwdriver?" He's like, "I'm all out of vodka."
And he's like, "So you have a daughter?
Is she hot? You know. And for the perverts watching at home, Mr. Donst, why don't you, in your own words, kind of give them a quick summary of this movie, the cliff notes, so to speak?
Of the whole movie?"
Yes, to summarize it.
Sure. So Pauly Shore is probably like a 6th-year college student. Even older than that. He meets this country town girl, and then during Thanksgiving break, she notices he doesn't have a family to go home to, so she nicely invites him to go back to her small farm, her small hometown, and then chaos pursues.
Right.
Turns out that her asshole cheating boyfriend was going to propose to her, and she didn't have the heart to tell him no. So instead, Pauly Shore claims that they've been actually engaged this entire time, which kind of pushes the whole movie's plot. And then
hilarity ensues.
They argue, they separate, and then by the end of the movie, they actually get together, and it's very heartwarming.
How many times have you revisited this film?
Oh, I probably saw it at least solid like 40 to 60 times in my life. Minimum.
What makes it have replay value that you love to keep revisiting?
So you have to give it credit because it has Kelly Kapowski in it.
Was she the hot friend that's a stripper?
Yes.
Yeah.
Tiffany Amber Thiessen from Saved by the Bell, who was like my first crush alongside with the Pink Power Ranger. So I'm pretty sure I happened to stumble upon her, and that's what kept me watching the movie. Has that great pro wrestling scene in the beginning when he mud wrestles that chick.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she's available for weddings.
So as pro wrestling, you have Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. He makes a cameo.
Yeah.
You have the guy that played Perry White in the Lois and Clark Adventures.
Oh, wow.
Superman. You remember? He played the father in this movie.
Oh, that's who he was. Yeah, he looked familiar. Of course, it has the kid who does the truffle shuffle from the Goonies.
Basically, the Avengers of comedy. Piece it together. Just has all these stars, all the stars aligned, and put it all together.
And what made you select that film? Because Pauly Shore was also in Biodome and a couple of other films with diminishing returns. But have you seen his other films?
I've seen Biodome, and people put it over, and I think I was entertained by it. But there's something about Son-in-Law I love. It's probably because, one, it's the first one I've seen. It's because it has all these other actors I'm familiar with. I think I do like the cheesy, like, heart heartwarming story at the end, or like they end up together. Like it's a nice little romantic comedy film. His one-liners are pretty funny. Also, I had a fan once draw me in a Steven Tyler PJs.
From Aerosmith.
Street cred.
Steven Tyler from Aerosmith?
Yeah, do you remember he kept wearing Steven Tyler PJs in the beginning? He was in like his leopard print pajamas.
In that film, his character is a bit ambiguous. He's known as Crawl. He makes a joke that he was nicknamed Crawl because that's how he got home every day from high school, which implies he was bullied. And it doesn't really.
No, I think it's because he would get so fucked up in college. That's how he crawled. He always crawled home.
Ah, I see. So there are levels of interpretation here at work, and it also he has a bit of a murky backstory. He grew up in Las Vegas. I think his father or his family members sells catheters, and he's like, oh, they might wash up on the beach. And he mentions that he studied hacking when he was in Las Vegas with all the computer systems. Then he goes to college, and one of the recurring jokes was like, "Oh, kung fu, karate. I studied that for 2 semesters." So he's sort of a jack of all trades with studying various eclectic crafts, but not really sticking. But I think one of the shortcomings of that film was like, who was this guy? Like, what makes him tick? What are his motivations? Like, it didn't really scratch the surface behind Pauly Shore's character Crawl just being this zany dude who seems exhausting to hang out around because he's always on and always dropping these one-liners and walking around funny and getting himself in these ridiculous situations. But as I was going to say before I started rambling, there's also almost has this pansexual energy to him. Like, he gives the mom a makeover, which I feel like most college-aged or even young adult, late 20-year-old men don't have enough fashion sense to dress women and make them look good. But in this film, he's very much like a fashionista.
Which that's one of my favorite lines of the movies when he's like, "Ooh, you're giving me a semi."
To his pretend girlfriend's mom that they're still romantically interested in.
And then it leads to that awesome scene with him on stage.
What at the karaoke bar?
He makes at that like farm dance festival. He makes everybody like line dance and shit. Yeah, it was you get like the best of both worlds. Like you get this chick in California, then you get Pauly Shore listening to John Denver's "Thank God I'm a Country Boy," which whenever I hear that song to this day, I think of that movie with him like spelling out his name in a cornfield.
Oh yeah, yeah. His character reminded me of. That was my first time watching a proper Pauly Shore movie. I knew who he was. I knew he was an MTV VJ and a comedian and that he starred in some films, but it was my first time sitting down and getting properly acquainted with the comedic genius of Pauly Shore. But yeah, it seemed like he was kind of an exhausting character because he was always on. It was like a mix of like, kind of like Jim Carrey in the early 90s, that similar type of manic, like, you know, in-character performance where he's just always going 110%, doesn't have an off switch. A little bit of Robin Williams. Kind of like reminded me of Tom Green before Tom Green.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see the Jim Carrey influence for sure. But just even some of how he says words I think are so memorable. Like he's like, chicken. Shit like that.
Do you have a favorite scene from that movie?
Do I have a favorite scene?
Yeah.
It'd probably have to be the screwdriver scene or the semi is pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, what a heartwarming. What about when his future grandfather, if they get, or grandfather-in-law, has a heart attack.
Right.
That was a very heartwarming moment. They had the whole father subplot, and then how he treats his son, like his dad treats him, and Pauly Shore brought them together, made him realize that.
Yeah, he
That's
tries.
heartwarming.
The grandfather has a heart attack. Pauly Shore goes to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and that grandfather's homophobia is what saves him because he sees Pauly Shore about to kiss him. He's like, "Ma, I'd rather die than have you put your lips on me."
Yeah, but do you remember the whole subplot with Pauly Shore making Zach, the son, get along with his father better by explaining to the dad how he treats him the same way his dad treats him?
Right, yes, because his son plays video games and he's like a computer nerd, and I guess the father gets on him for playing Game Boy. As children of the 90s, I'm sure that we both often had our parents be like, "Go outside and play, put down the Sega or Nintendo."
You know, for a comedy, though, I feel like all the characters have pretty good, like, motivation. Like, Kelly Kapowski wants to bang the ex-fiance. He's, like, leading her on because he wants to have a side piece, but he wants to marry the main girl.
He wants to have his cake and eat it. Yeah, this guy doesn't take no for an answer. Yeah.
He's just jealous of that everybody likes this new guy, and he's making his life harder, so he goes at Pauly Shore.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very much a good commentary on small town social status. You have the boyfriend who just keeps proposing every chance he gets, in public too, which is a little bit not very considerate, putting somebody on the spot in public, and proposes to her in a barn, proposes to her at Thanksgiving.
He gets punched, he's like, "So I take it we're not going to be friends?" He, like, steals his girl from him.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite line from that movie?
Probably "You're giving me a semi."
Yeah. I mean, my favorite part that just made me cringe so badly was at some point, Crawl, Pauly Shore's character, he calls food grindage, which is like super, like the most stereotypical, I guess, California slang. And at one point, at the very end of the movie, when they finally settle down for Thanksgiving dinner, the dad's like, "All right, now let's gather around and have some grindage," and it shows the rooster crowing, and then it's the end. And it just cuts to the credits. So that was
definitely needs a sequel. Did you enjoy it at all, though?
I did. It's a movie that is definitely
that you thought you would.
I'm not sure about that, but it was. You know, some movies, Mr. Donst, you know, they're hot messes. Like we're no strangers to fucking terrible movies. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we were at your house and we watched that Hulk Hogan movie, No Holds Barred, that is so bad that it's like hilarious. But then you have some movies that are like bad, but they're not super like laugh out loud bad. And I think Son-in-Law is kind of in the middle of the road. It's not quite like Ed Wood territory where it's like gather around, like let's watch this heaping train wreck. But it's not exactly like a great movie. But it still has its like laugh out loud moments, whether it's intentional or just unintentional, in that it hasn't aged very well. But I feel like you could also make a drinking game out of it with all the 90s things that are in it, between payphones and handy camcorders and just it's very much like a time capsule film.
Definitely. It's definitely memorable, too. Like, for a movie that you've seen one time, like, you're going to remember words from it. You're going to remember scenes from it.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer that a movie's lasting power is how quotable it is.
Agreed.
Like new Star Wars movies made gazillion dollars, but guess what? They're not very quotable.
That's true, and I couldn't tell you what scene happened in like which movies either.
Right? Yeah. They were like playing word salad there with characters and plot points, but that's a story for another day. So now that we're in a kind of indefinite state of Netflix and chill for the foreseeable future, like what have you been doing at home or around your town to sort of stay sane?
I've just been doing a lot of cleaning, a lot of work I constantly like put off.
Yeah.
Figuring out how to use some computer programs so I can get a little bit more creative.
Oh, cool.
Just trying to spend my time wisely. Been playing a lot of Ticket to Ride. Have you ever played that board game?
I've not.
It's really fun.
Yeah. Is it something you can play by yourself?
No, you play online, but there's an
cool.
online version.
Nice. Yeah, or do you have as a wrestler? Do you feel like the itch to get back? You're like, oh man, I can't wait to like get back in there and clothesline some motherfuckers.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, longer I go without wrestling, this has always been, because typically I'd only go maybe 2 weeks without a match.
Yeah.
The longer I go without wrestling, the more attention cravey I get from like people. The more I'm like, look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
Like, the more annoying I get to my social group.
So you're kind of like in the throes of the need for attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So I appreciate you having me do this and giving me some attention.
Yeah, baby. I mean, you've always been not just a great workman-like wrestler who always busts his ass, but you're also a funny motherfucker and a creative person. So, of course, I'll always encourage you to continue honing those crafts. And you've got a great mind and personality, not just for the ring, but outside of the ring and other areas of the limelight. Yeah. So, Mr. Donst, in closing, before we shut the book on son-in-law, what's the main takeaway you have from this film?
Has a lovely cast of characters, a nice little time machine down memory lane, some good one-liners, and I would argue like a pretty fun date film. If you're gonna like hang out with a girl, this might be a movie you want to pop on because she's gonna get her emotional heartstrings attached to the plot and want to see these two characters make it.
Yeah. That's pretty solid advice. I would say that it reminded me that life is short. Sometimes you end up on a farm, and sometimes you're in the middle of a costume party. But either way, you got to have your wits about you, and you always have to be equipped with some pretty strong one-liners and ready to expect the unexpected.
That's right.
So one of the things I've been doing since we're kind of in permanent stay-at-home mode lately is watching a lot of wrestling. There's a great Dark Side of the Ring series on Vice because oftentimes the stories behind wrestling are just as compelling, if not even more compelling, than the stories that happen, in front of the curtain for the audience. There's also been Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast. You just listen to David Lee Roth, one of my rock and roll idols, on the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast. So if you want to talk about a meeting of great minds and great performers, that was really entertaining. And then also just watching some old matches. I got to see you in that hardcore match in AIW the other day, which was pretty fucking brutal. Has there been any like wrestling matches or just old squared circle memories you've revisited?
Well, I watched that match that I had with Matt Justice in AIW, so I appreciate you checking it out. That was definitely a slugfest. We went through the stage and everything.
Yeah.
But I've been watching that Vice, The Dark Side of the Ring, and all of them have been excellent so far.
Yeah, same. I think I've watched almost all of them except for a couple. But I watched the Bruiser Brody episode. That was sad. The Moolah episode. The Gino Hernandez episode. Of course, the Macho Man pilot. Montreal Screwjob, and then the Chris Benoit two parts, I think, and Brawl for All, which was a fabulous disaster if there ever was one.
And even stories that wrestling fans are absolutely familiar with, like the Chris Benoit murder or the Montreal Screwjob, which you've heard a million times.
Right.
I still think they captured it in a new way, and you still learn new information about the case matters.
Yeah, and it was great to see Jake the Snake and Scott Hall as well. They interviewed them on several episodes, and they seem like not only are they a welcome resource of wit and knowledge, but they seem like they're doing really well too.
Yeah, and the New Jack one was like,
woo!
That was like probably my favorite so far.
Yeah, the one is crazy.
Because one of its stories you could do a whole hour on.
Right? Yeah, the mass transit incident alone is stories and chapters worth of madness. My one buddy actually did a series with New Jack as Starman in the early 2010s. You might have seen it on YouTube. And they did a couple of like comedy shorts with Starman and New Jack because New Jack is an entertainer as well and a comedian trying to break into the entertainment industry instead of getting thrown off the scaffolding. Don't blame him for making that transition. So I was bummed that I didn't see Starman and New Jack in the Vice documentary, but that's also out there online if you want to go see some local Philadelphia humor. that has crossed paths with you, Jack.
Yeah, later I'll have to show you New Jack stuff with Sharkwire and TNA, stuff of legends.
The stuff of legends, yeah. There's a lot of good TNA I missed out on, so you'll have to catch me up to speed within the squared circle. So Tim fucking Donst, I want to say thank you for going one-on-one with the Grim One and talking to me about the great 90s movie Son-in-Law. We'll have to do this again sometime, baby.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I hope everyone stays safe out there.